progression of women in financial and professional services, and dare I say, beyond. For our members and regulars, welcome, welcome. It is, as always, a pleasure to have you with us. And I know that you're variously on our own platform, LinkedIn Live, YouTube, Facebook, and of course, a few of you still on the Zoom. So welcome, everyone. Well, as always, we have so much great stuff coming up to take us out for the last but 1 week before Christmas. So we've got Sarah today, who I'll introduce momentarily, and then, of course, Lily and Yolanda in the following weeks as well. Now, as always, I do say a big, big thank you to our corporate partners. This year, more than ever, you have been so great, and it's been so wonderful to welcome 7 new corporate partners this year. We would not be here and having the impact that we do without all of you and your staff on the journey with us. So it is so great, as always, to have you part of this. And today, you know, I love to have some exciting new announcements, and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome all of you from Vanguard who have just joined as members. So hello, I can't see you, but I know that you're out there tuning in for probably your first live stream. So welcome. It is so brilliant to have you on as members, and we hope you get as much out of this as all our other members do. So brilliant to have you as part of this journey with us as well. So what have we got coming up? Well, as always, it is jam-packed. Now, a few of you would have probably heard me say by now that next Wednesday is actually our last live stream for the year. And somehow, I'm not sure how, of course, by beautiful design, we're going to hit our 100th episode on our very last episode for the year. And next week is actually, it's a bit of a different one. Our Wednesday night show will actually be at 9 p.m. because our guest next week is streaming live from Poland, of course. But for this week, we've got Sarah today, who I'll introduce in a moment. And then, of course, tomorrow. So if you've been tuning in on our Thursdays, for the last couple of months, we've been co-hosting our Thursday show with Sandstone. And it's all about the Digital First Banking Transformation series, where we talk to incredible leaders with a lens very much around all things digital transformation. And for any leaders out there, you know that it's probably got this much to do with the tech and so much more to do with the people, the culture, the systems, customers, you name it. So we get some really great insights from our guests on Thursdays around this. And then back next Tuesday for the diversity series with my wing woman, Tiffany Slater, who I missed yesterday, with Yolanda Beatty, who is an amazing woman, businesswoman, entrepreneur, and is very passionate about leadership in all its guises. So don't miss those. Now, the final events we've got, so we had our last masterclass with Gordon last Friday. To take us out for the year, next week, we've got our last circles for the year. So please don't miss these. These have been so popular. I mean, they've always been popular, but I think this year more than ever, obviously people are craving connection and having a peer group. So if you haven't been to one of our circle events yet, please do come just before Christmas. It's Monday at 12. We also do an express one on Thursday mornings as well. But Monday, I'm actually going to be co-hosting with Penny Lovett, who's one of our advisory board members, an incredibly experienced businesswoman and leader in her own right. So she'll be with me. And if you haven't been to one of these before, they are confidential, they're small group, and you can literally bring anything to the table and even come along if you don't have a problem or something you need to solve, because they're a great way to build out your networks and relationships really intentionally. So all you need to do is just register via our platform. It is as simple as pushing the button to register, and everything else is done for you. But places do go fast with these, so do register for the Monday one if you'd like to come along now. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's guest, Sarah Piper. So for those of you who don't yet know Sarah, she has spent eons in the world of talent strategy, people advisory, and end-to-end recruitment. She's been fortunate enough to work across the UK, Southeast Asia, and Australia, delivering great work and helping businesses transform and grow through connecting people and helping those teams thrive. Sarah has applied her knowledge to create a robust 7-step hiring strategy that moves hiring from guesswork to a robust data-driven decision. It's this framework that underpins her differentiated business, Invisible Partners. Invisible Partners is a talent advisory firm and insourced recruitment partner, giving organisations an outsider perspective on the inside. Having launched businesses from scratch herself, Sarah knows exactly what it takes to build teams that don't just do a job, but that form a community and culture that build, evolve, and stand the test of time. Wow. Let's take the slide down. Sarah Piper, welcome.
Thank you. So nice to be here, Alex. Thank you for inviting me. exciting. Wednesday hump day. Couldn't get better.
Oh, exactly right. So, hey, thank you for being here as well. So, there are so many things that I want to chat to you about, as you know.
Great.
But you know, my favorite first question, because that bio, there are so many threads I want to pull there. But there's not much about you as Sarah Piper. So, you know, I do love to ask our guests, give us a bit of a flavour of you in your own words. What's your journey to this point?
Yeah, it's been a really it's not been a straight path. I don't know many journeys that end in anything worth doing that is a straight crow's fly. So I'm Scottish. I'm not from around these parts. So made the journey here when I was 23, not knowing a soul. But before I came to Australia, I'd had about 3 different careers before recruitment and talent became my area of passion. I was an international event groom, traveling all around the world, looking after very, very expensive horses, show jumping and eventing and doing all sorts of fun stuff. That was fabulous. But I got really, really over having no money and smelling of horse poo. So that was a short-lived career. That was my early days. I've done all sorts of crazy things, but really when I transitioned my recruitment career from Edinburgh to Melbourne, and then had a few years in Southeast Asia too, all of that experience has really culminated to having the vision to start Invisible Partners. But it's been a crazy ride.
Yeah, I so connect with that, because often people ask me, which I probably shared before, you know, when you speak to people who, dare I say, are younger and starting out, and like, how did you plan your career? And I always kind of exactly make that face and just go, gosh, I didn't, you know, I was just really open to opportunities. And as you said, you know, it's kind of this curvy, bumpy, tangent kind of road, but I feel like you need to do that to explore different things and to try things on for size.
So true. And I think, you know, all the experiences that you gather along the way, the resilience that I gained through working at, you know, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to feed horses and to go out there in the pitch black in a Scottish winter's morning, that kind of grit and determination that saw me do that for years on end, living in caravans with no running water, no electricity in the north of Scotland. I think that made me into tough stuff. And whilst it seems completely irrelevant to what I do now, and practically it kind of is, it certainly saw me build some muscle around determination and grit that I think is useful now.
Okay, I love that, because I also, I'm a big believer, but it probably for me, it didn't sort of, I wasn't thinking about it so clearly until quite recently, that, you know, everything that you've done in your life leads you to this point. Like, you can draw on everything, even though it's not apparent at the time. So I completely agree. Before we get off the horses and smelling of horse poo, which I do chuckle when you say that, I can imagine. How did you actually, was it that horses were a passion of yours growing up and a role presented itself, or how did that actually happen?
Totally, and it's really interesting. That whole pathway was in the face of huge resistance from my parents, because I was a straight A student, you know, on the path to do all the traditional thing of university and on. And I had different ideas. I loved horses. I'd been around horses from a very young age and had a complete affinity with the beautiful beast that is and the equestrian industry and the competition attached to eventing. I just loved it all. And just announced to my parents one day that that's what I was going to do at 16 years old. I was going to relocate to the north of Scotland, not knowing a soul. And my dad kind of played chicken with me, you know, all right, who's going to blink first? That's fine. Shall I give you a lift? And so I jumped in the car thinking, is he gonna stop me doing this? Because somebody needs to stop me doing this. And nobody stopped me doing it. And I'm glad that they didn't, because genuinely, the things I learned and the things I learned about myself, about what I was capable of, was phenomenal. And the pathway that it led me on to around international travel and meeting some really exciting high profile people, including Princess Anne, that whole eventing circuit.
Oh, hang on, back up the front. You've just now name dropped royalty, so we need to go into that.
It's one of the right royals, one of the quieter royals that's got kind of unscathed reputation.
How was it meeting her? Was it a bit surreal?
It was amazing, but because we were all in the space of eventing, it's such a level playing field when you're doing any kind of sport, I think, particularly a rural sport like equestrian equestrian eventing. So we were walking the course together. You walk a course before you jump it, and we were walking the course to size up pacing. And I was doing that on behalf of my very wealthy eventer, and I was her groom, sort of doing all this sort of legwork. And there was Princess Anne. I can't imagine she particularly remembers me on a first name basis, but she was very approachable, and we were chatting about all stuff horsey. So it was good fun.
I love it. And look, we're having a bit of a laugh, but already some of the things that you're talking about so spark for me, about certain things being the great leveler and your own ideas. I think especially when we talk a lot in this community about who here is a recovering perfectionist, A-type personality, all that and that's not bad, is it? Like being an A-grade student, really striving for performance, having high standards, they're great things. But I don't know about you, but certainly for me, as I don't say older anymore, I say, wiser. As I get wiser, having, finally starting to find some of that balance between the striving and the high performance and the pressure with a bit more flex, I think has taken me ages to kind of really get to that point. Did you find the same thing?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I actually think it's only since I had children, so I have two young children, a 5-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter, and up until they became part of my world and I was forced to be less one-dimensional. I couldn't just be on one track around my career, which I very much was prior to children. I was forced to decompartmentalize, otherwise I would have gone round the bend. And I think my husband probably would say I probably did on certain days, just around the standards that I held myself to.
Yeah.
And so I think the things that I have learned that have supported me in being able to create invisible partners and set up a thriving business, and every day is a learning day. There's some days that work better than others, has been around decompartmentalizing, doing the best you can in the moment and then leaving it behind, and that kind of sense of being mindful and present in the moment, when you're mindful about being mindful, is so transformative around being able to enjoy the next moment that you're in that doesn't have anything to do with the previous moment. So when you're juggling kids, family life, work, everything that goes into any busy life today, I think it energizes you if you can leave the last interaction behind and set yourself up for complete presence in the next moment. And they're the things that I work on continuously because it's a practice, but that really serves me.
Thank goodness you said that you still work on that, because I have to, and I'm nodding and agreeing violently. And for all of you out there who are listening to this, and as always, you can, Jayden will look out for any questions if you want to put them in the chat. But, you're organically talking, Sarah, about, I think, one of the biggest challenges, and it's not just for women. I think, and we could talk about the year that's been and all the rest of it and the lessons we've probably learned, but for so many people in our community, it is that constant challenge of being present. Like, it's one thing to say, right, I really need to be more present, but I have to certainly constantly catch myself from pondering what happened or what could have gone better or what's going to happen. And I'm definitely getting, I wouldn't say better, it's a practice, as you say. I love that you say that. But it's really, once you can start to really bring yourself back to what's happening right now, and then leave that behind and go to the next one, it's one of those incredibly important skills, I think. And we're both kind of saying, you got to keep working on it. And, our community, so we've got amazing professionals, we've got women who are entrepreneurs and business owners and men, we've got C-suite, we've got emerging leaders, so we've got all sorts in our community. The thing I love about these conversations is that, everyone listening, you'll get something from Sarah's journey, whether it be, you starting your business or whatever it might be. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about next.
Sure.
Tell us a bit about, tell us what Invisible Partners actually does, because then I want to go back to kind of the origin, and then I'd love to get into the entrepreneur businesswoman, how to actually the daily lessons of running a business. It'd be really good to hear your take on what was your inspiration behind the business. Why is it, different from the kind of probably the familiar recruitment process that probably most of us would have been through in our careers on either side.
On either side of the fence, for sure. basically what we do with our clients is help them. We go into businesses. So unlike your external agency partners, which we all know and love and have a place in the ecosystem of talent for sure, what we do is we go into the business and we sit shoulder to shoulder with whoever our stakeholder is and help them hire. So we help them bring in talent. That's not particularly unique, but what we do is we help them with the thinking before they start hiring. What I observed in the lead up to having the light bulb moment to launch Invisible Partners was that you'd fill a role, you'd see that something was going to happen later in the track around culture or around the less than perfect recruitment process that was going to make that hire come unstuck, or another hire as a consequence was going to come unstuck. And so I used to get really frustrated around how little I could do to help that business or help the individual I was placing in a role because they weren't being set up for success. So what we do as Invisible Partners is we go into an organization, help them with the thinking beforehand, understanding their organizational mission, understanding how roles link into that. So that role clarity piece is something we spend an awful lot of time doing before we even think about the hiring process. And then we dig really, really deep around what are the essential skills that organization might need to be successful in that role. And I'm not talking about the wish list of you must have this technology or this kind of shopping list of really narrow skills and experience that don't actually predict any kind of success. I'm talking about attributes that really make an ordinary performer turn into a transformative high performer. We dig deep around that stuff, and we dig deep around how do you assess that stuff, and then we go to market. So after all that thinking stuff has taken place, we leave the organization with those assets and with that architecture, and then we help them hire really well because of it. So that's what we do.
And that's a great explanation. So I again resonate with this because having been in corporate for a very long time myself as well, you can everything you're describing there about jumping into hire and making decisions under pressure and not really thinking through. I remember one of my good friends and mentors always used to say to me, he said, "Alex, always be recruiting." Like, this is going back years and years and years now. And I remember at the time I was thinking, I said to him, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "Even when I don't have a job, I'm thinking about my talent. I know the market, I know what we're looking like." But to your point, it's there's all this work that comes before the action which people normally jump into, which is, oh, great, where's that job description? And by the way, I'd love all these things. So when you're talking about different attributes, because I think this is something good to tease out, when you're talking, in your experience about the attributes that take, an ordinary person to a transformative high performer, as you described, what are those things that you see time and time again? Is there something? Is it industry specific? Does it transcend industry? What do you see?
I think it's a really topical question right now in the midst of COVID and all the things that we have been through this year. Because I think there are certain traits that are even more important. They've always been important, but there are certain traits that are essential in when you're looking at hiring for next year. So as we look into the sort of the recovery mode of 2021, some of the traits that I think all leaders should be thinking about, do they have in their team and how do they acquire them for next year if they don't, are things like learning agility. If you reflect on this last 12 months, and I'm sure you'd agree, Alex, where you think about the people that have performed well, that you've had visibility on, those people that can learn on the hop, that can be adaptable, that are resilient, which is kind of a bit of a overused trait, but I think that learning agility and adaptability and agility of thought, really, they're the traits that really take, particularly in this current climate, somebody from being ordinary and okay and kind of a steady Eddie to somebody who's actually going to move the business forward and help the recovery of your organization if you are in recovery mode in response to this year, or if you're just looking to play catch up or whatever it is to address the challenges we've faced. That learning agility, that drive, that inbuilt drive and sense of urgency, that's a trait that's hard to develop in someone. You've actually got to hire it in and acquire that skill base if you don't have it in your team.
So true, again, so much that you're talking about here, because it's, I remember there are things, what's that old saying, there are things that you can teach and things that are innate, that to your exact point now. How do you, because I think, as I said before, there's loads of different angles that people are listening from, either wow, you know, one, I want to talk to you about the job market and what you see happening for next year. Because there's probably a lot of our community who've either been through a restructure or redundancy or thinking what's next. But also as a hiring leader, there is so much that goes into this, and actually being able, how do you see or how do you assess if the candidates you're talking to have these kind of innate qualities? Like, are there certain things, you know, that with your experience you go, yeah, well, you know, this is actually, it's probably an imperfect science, but, you know, what are the things that you'd be looking for as a leader who's going, yes, that's what I need?
Yeah, I think it's having a really robust hiring process. So nothing that I'm going to share with you is particularly original or revolutionary, but it's rarely done, and that's the key thing. Most organizations and most leaders are time poor, and therefore when they hire on gut feel and likability. So that's how I would say 90% of hiring is done. Coffee chats, maybe a little bit of, if you've got an HR business partner that supports you through it, you might have a couple of behavioural questions thrown in there for good measure. But the importance that are placed on those behavioural questions, I'd question. So really, to answer your question, how do you evaluate those skills that we just talked about, or those attributes we just talked about? It's around laying out a really robust hiring process. So placing some importance around what behaviours you're going to try and tease out from that individual to predict future performance. So past performance as a measure or a predictor of future performance, and how can you frame some really serious thoughtful questions that tease that out from the individual. Even doing things like which are less of the norm, like case studies. So asking the individual that you're looking to hire to present their first 90 days in a job. Not original, not particularly innovative, but very rarely done. And that kind of project, you're not only assessing their communication skills and their ability to think around how to step into a job, but you're assessing their drive, you're assessing their motivational fit, how much effort are they putting into a project like that. It could be more technical. It could be a case study of something they might face in your organization in that particular capacity. And again, you're really assessing that motivational fit, how much effort are they putting into things, but you're assessing a particular technical skill. What's the thought process and how do they think about a problem? And there are things that go on. And I think interview processes are imperfect. You're often particularly in conversational or one-to-one interviews or one-to-two interviews, you're often asking people to perform in a really fake environment.
Yeah.
You've never met this person before, and all of a sudden you're asking them to be on their best game and present themselves in a really high octane pressure cooker environment. But by giving them a case study or some sort of project that they work on and come back in a considered fashion to present to, you're giving them half the chance to really shine. And I think that those types of aspects in a hiring process are often overlooked. So that's how I'd do that.
I love that, because I think you're so right that, you know, we often look for the next kind of shiny thing, not just in recruitment, right? But, we often find ourselves saying, this isn't revolutionary, it's nothing new, and the but is exactly what you say is, yes, we know that we should have a robot, we know that we should exercise, we know that we should, all those fundamental things, we know that communication's important, all those basics, but as you say, we know them, but so rarely actually done or executed with enough thought and planning, which I think this is incredibly important, because look, we all know, I mean, we jump into hiring people and it's such a big decision, and we know when it goes wrong, or not even if it goes badly wrong, if it's just the wrong fit.
Yeah.
The derailment for a business, a team, a culture, it's just, so this is where I completely agree, people need to think long and hard. I also love that, because as you're talking also about the fact that, 90-odd%, we hire on gut feel and likability, and do I feel comfortable with you? And I kind of think back to, maybe my earlier days as a hire and go, oh, yes, yeah. Because it's one thing, I think, yes, intuition, but you need to have, it's both. But I think that also speaks to diversity and lack of diversity in teams, right? Because, and again, this is nothing new about talking about unconscious bias and all these things, but this is what happens. I haven't thought through really strategically. I've got this pressure that I need to fill a position. Yeah. You're in my orbit, or someone that you recommend's in my orbit. We have a coffee, and before you know it, like, is that what you're
done?
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you miss such an opportunity that way and it's not just the obvious kind of diversity and inclusion measures that we're all kind of akin to and accustomed to around gender or disability or age or ethnic background. It's just diversity of thought. So if you're a really extroverted person and you interview somebody that's incredibly introverted and not particularly self-confident with communicating themselves, but what you're asking them to do doesn't require that, it actually requires a completely different, thoughtful, considered, analytical skill set, then make sure you're putting a recruitment process together that actually allows them to shine, and so you can extract the skills and experience you're looking for. And so that's where we do fall into the trap of hiring people that are like ourselves and not actually meeting the need of that particular role, and then go figure it becomes unstuck. And to your point earlier around the kind of cost of a bad hire, the cost 150% of that person's annualized salary and culture, never mind not hitting the goal that you had that person in place to help you deliver to. And so I think, slowing down that old adage that, take a long time to hire and fire really quickly, whatever that catchphrase is, which I probably should know. It's true. It's catchphrase. It's a cliche for a reason, because thinking up front around hiring and how you're going to assess the qualities you're looking to attract is money and time well spent, I think.
Yeah, and it's the strategic thought process. I also love you've talked a few times about diversity of thought, and that idea around the case studies. It is such a great way, because as you were describing that a few minutes ago, I'm thinking it actually doesn't matter if what they say to you their first 90 days or whatever is going to be. It doesn't matter if they miss the mark totally. It's how they've approached the problem, getting insight into how they've, like, everything you're saying, like, this is it's so important. So we could talk about this for days and days. I want to go to kind of the other side of the market, or the other lens, if you like. So there's a couple of things which I'd love your thoughts on, and you can pick any of these. One, it would be super interesting to hear your take on actually what's happening around the job market, because I think, in this year, I mean, it's been a weird year, right? Like, and we haven't reflected, we haven't sort of wallowed in it too much here, but there's been moments where we don't know what's coming next, and everyone kind of went into the bunker at the start and then kind of half emerged. Then we went back into lockdown. Now I think businesses and leaders are going, okay, well, the world hasn't stopped. It's different and things are changing. But I feel like, especially now, some of our community who are looking for roles, there's been a few times when they're like, oh, well, obviously now's not the time. No one's going to be hiring. Everyone's actually divesting themselves of staff. And I actually don't feel like that's the case. I think there absolutely are roles out there, but you can give us a bit more insight. I'd love to get your insight on what is the state of play? What are you seeing out there? What do you think is going to happen around this space next year? Is it all doom and gloom if you want a job, or is there other opportunities?
There's totally opportunities. I think you've had guests on before, our mutual friend Nikki Smith, who talks very actively and very authoritatively about the hidden job market, and that is a real thing. It's a thing. The clients that engage us, 40 to 50% of those roles are never ever advertised, because we take a search approach to market. So we tap people on the shoulder, and if we don't know who you are, then it's very hard for us to track you down and uncover you. So that hidden job market and being headhuntable is a vital part, and a really low time investment part of your own career strategy. So it's the obvious platforms like LinkedIn, making sure that you've got a really compelling profile that talks about yourself as an individual with some personality, with some differentiation, and making sure that you have your head above the pulpit, being approachable. Making sure your network's really strong. But to go back to your original question around what's the job market like, it's actually buoyant. I think at the beginning of the year, when all this crazy started to infiltrate, there was definitely a recruitment freeze on everywhere. I saw a huge impact in my business, and it was really unknown what was going to happen in the future. I think we are now, because the confidence has returned in the economics, from an economic standpoint, it's returning. People now going, oh crikey, we've got us huge hairy goals to fill. We need resource. We need resource quickly. And so people are hiring like crazy. There's a huge peak on right before Christmas, and it always is every year. My busiest quarter in any recruitment year, and this year is even more so, I'd say, is the December quarter, because people will have this psychological deadline that they want to go to the beach in January and be chilled and know that they've got their team in place. So if you are swithering and thinking I better not do anything before Christmas, you're mad. You have to get on the horse, get your CV dusted off, make sure your LinkedIn profile is as it should be, and make sure that you are headhuntable for people like me and people in my team, to see you and have visibility of you.
Oh my God, this is so good, because, it won't surprise you that, you and I talk about this as well offline. One, the hidden job market. Two, I think it is, well, you can tell me what you think, but I feel like, and especially obviously our community is very much, lots of ladies in our community, but I think there is this hidden talent. There are so many talented women out there. And yet only the other day, I got another anecdote about a very senior role that was being advertised, sought after, couldn't find any female candidates. So they've gone for, it kind of goes, it's a combination of what you were saying before about, I'll go back to kind of my familiar, kind of the people I know. Yes. But I love that you're talking about be headhuntable. And I would say as well, even if you are not looking for a job now, even if you're sitting there going, well, Alex, you know what, I'm really happy where I am, and I actually probably don't need to worry about that now. I'd kind of be saying now is the time that you have everything that you've said. Have you got any more insights or tips around, when you're literally in that role and you're searching for talent, what is it that you are looking for that makes people stand out, because that they are actually doing all the things that make them, put their head above the parapet?
Yeah. I think it's there are some basic tips that are kind of not particularly out there, but it's having a well-written LinkedIn profile, making sure it's up to date, making sure your photograph is compelling and contemporary and not kind of 1980s corporate shot or some fun social shot. And so it doesn't need to be hugely expensive. There are loads of outfits out there. You can get a sort of contemporary corporate photo done for LinkedIn, but it's worthwhile because it does set you apart from people that haven't invested that time in their career journey. So there are your kind of basic tips. Then it's making sure that your network is really thriving. So you have connections. Don't just connect with anybody, but you have connections that you really are investing time, making sure you're connecting with people that relate to your profession. It's making sure that you comment and you contribute to content that you see visible that's noteworthy. And then it kind of then that's kind of your basics. That makes sure that I in my job, in my capacity, in my team's capacity, can see that you invest in yourself professionally. You haven't just let your LinkedIn profile go like a wasteland that's been neglected. Things like skills and keywords are important. So if you're a CFO or a strategy person and there are things that underpin those professions, making sure those keywords are visible in your LinkedIn profile so I can search them. But then it's just about being visible in terms of the content that you're posting, and it kind of is a segue into some of the things that we're going to talk about shortly, but it's kind of a double-edged sword. I'm really passionate about, you mentioned earlier about even when you're not looking, you should be looking. I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly when you should be looking. It's kind of the thing that was talked about 10 years ago, and some people found it really hard to kind of grasp their head around personal branding, but it is personal branding. Yeah. And that personal branding, that career branding, extends to being branded and being recognized as a good leader. So I understand a lot of your audience are in leadership capacities in various forms, emerging or more further progressing their career journey. And so it's about making sure that you're known to be the leader that you are. And there's lots of things that you can do from a content perspective that are not just self-serving. Look at me, I'm amazing. Most people find that kind of content pretty hard to produce, and also it's not very interesting to read. But by the associated celebration of your team and what your team is getting stuck into collectively, that then shines a huge light on you as a positive leader and represents you as somebody that people would want to work with, which is an area that I'm really passionate about, or some people that you'd want to be headhuntable for the next destination that you might have in your career.
Oh, I love it. Again, there is so much here, and we do have a question. So we're going to ask the question. So Song, thank you very much. So Song says, Sarah, thanks for very good tips. We often think hiring is so time consuming that many managers just want to hire the first person that comes through the door. Any tips on how you could tease out of candidates around stakeholder management, to really get a sense of how well they'll do that? Answers to behavioural questions on this can be quite standard, as people normally know the answer, but it's actually hard to do well. And how do you really get some insight into that? So great question.
Great question. I think there's a couple of steps in the recruitment process that, again, are invariably overlooked, and I think they're underutilized. Reference checking would be how I would probably approach that if you want real live data. References are often people don't place any importance in reference checks because you would expect that someone's offering a referee that they want, that are going to say nice things about them. But I would challenge you to actually ask for the referees that you want to see from the individual you're assessing. So if they've had a big stint in Telstra and you want to see what that experience was like, or you weren't quite sure about their departure from a particular team, or that particular collection of experience was really relevant to the job that you're looking at, I'd ask them to give you the hiring manager for that particular experience, so you can really deep dive on things like stakeholder management. How did they manage stakeholders? Tell me what reputation they developed for themselves. Really exploring that, and almost questions in the referee saying stakeholder into them. And so really drilling in and letting the candidate know that that's what you're going to be doing, that you're really going to be using references as part of an evaluation process. It's not just a tick box exercise. So everyone understands what the role references play in your process, and making sure that you don't outsource that. So taking those references yourself versus your recruiter. That would be my tip.
And I think that is so powerful, because you're right. It's one of those things, for all the reasons you've said, can get overlooked or outsourced. And you've got, especially when you're the leader of the team, you've got to really allow time. And as you said, not just to tick the box. And that question, I always found one of the questions that I think is a really great one as well, is when you ask someone, because I know I've been asked as well when I've been a referee for other people, that would you hire that person again? In the same role? Because it's a very pointed question, right? Yeah. So I think that's hopefully helpful for you, Song, but I think this is where you don't shortcut some of these things. You really want to think about the questions what do you actually want to know? So I think that's really great. I want to talk to you, and I think I was saying to you before we went live, you were talking to me last week or whenever about your passion for destination teams, which is a segue from, this personal brand as a leader. And it so captivated my imagination, because I'm sure you'd say, well, again, hey, it's not new, but I think it's super important to talk about this and what you see and what you mean by that. Because I actually referenced it in our live yesterday when I was talking to our guest yesterday. And I said, oh, yes, we've got someone coming on that talks about the importance as a team and a leader of being a destination team, because talented people, no matter the market, always have choice. So talk to us a bit about that, because I think this is really, really important for all of you out there wanting to build culture, build teams, high performance, attract the best talent. This is super, super important, I think.
Awesome. Again, so pulling into the conversation, the climate just now. So the market really is hotting up, and finding really good talent has not become any easier. So whilst there was a bit of displacement earlier this year and people were retrenched, really good people were retrenched, the competitiveness for talent is still remains, and so that hasn't gone away. And so whilst there are particularly in larger banking organizations and financial service organizations, and even more broadly, you often got your trusty corporate comms team that are rolling out really effective employer brand campaigns that have their place, and they really do give an umbrella, uniformed window into that organization's sort of culture. It's very much poster on the wall culture. It doesn't really tell you what it feels like and looks like to join that particular team, particularly when you're thinking about enterprise organizations, like your sort of top tier organizations in any industry. And so the onus is on the leader to create some sort of branding that represents their team in market. Individuals that are of a high performing category, the general thing that they're looking for, the number one thing they're looking for, are really interesting problems to solve. One of the questions I ask everybody before I start interviewing them is, what are you looking for from your career? And I can tell you more times than not, I'm looking for really interesting problems to solve, and I'm looking to have an impact. I'm looking not to be a number. I'm looking to understand what my role does to help the organizational direction or mission. And so I think the opportunity for leaders is to help that narrative occur. So the organizational mission might be to, I don't know, cure cancer. What does your team do to contribute to that mission?
Yeah.
I think there's an absolutely cracking anecdote. I'm not going to get all the detail right, but it really articulates my point around role clarity and organizational mission and connecting the two. So the NASA space station, I think it was John F. Kennedy was visiting, and he stumbles across a janitor with a mop in his hand, and he asks this person anecdotally, what do you do? And he says, I help put people on the moon. So he saw his direct contribution to sweeping the floors or cleaning as helping put people on the moon. And that's so visible. And so what does your team do to help whatever your ultimate organizational mission is? So reverse engineering what your team does to achieve that. And you can, there's a whole heap of things you can do to make that visible for people that are assessing you as an organization to join, and potentially looking at researching your team to come on board too. But really making that very clear, making that kind of that commentary clear. And you know, where possible and where appropriate and where it's not too confidential, sharing publicly the things that you might share internally. So let's say there's been a huge success and a goal achieved collectively. How can you repurpose some of that content you might be sharing internally to make it appropriate for the external marketplace? So people that are evaluating you can see, oh wow, those guys are really getting stuck into something interesting. I want to be part of that.
I love it. There is so much gold there. I told you run out of time. I can't believe it's true.
I reckon it's slide time, baby.
It is slide time, baby. So, so Jan, can you put up the slides for Sarah? Because I know, Sarah, oh God, there are so many tips that you've already given already, but I'd love you to just go through these to really tap into some practical stuff.
So I've kind of covered off number one with the kind of linking the team's purpose with how it influences the organizational mission. Think about where your audience hangs out, and you know this live is a great example. So where does your audience consume content? And it might not always be LinkedIn. So if you are in procurement, if you're in strategy, you know, where does your audience hang out? Are there industry publications? Are there forums like Few that are better to serve your content into? And you know, it doesn't need to all be about you. Thinking about how you can celebrate individual success within your team. If you've got a high performer you want to give some kudos to, whether you make that public, that can give a really good window into what you're like as a leader. So you're the sort of person that's going to celebrate success and build a platform for people to thrive in. I think sharing content, I mentioned earlier around seeing opportunities and looking for opportunities, particularly looking for opportunities to share content. It's not good enough to be a great high performing team and be good at what you do. You've got to be seen to be good at what you do. Yeah. And so it's looking for opportunities to publish some of that stuff. So it could be looking at your quarter retrospectively and thinking, what have we done this quarter that is amazing and worth publicly sharing? It could be that it's appropriate to look at case studies. Maybe you've just managed a massive digital transformation and you want to talk about some of that and can package it into some sort of case study and learning. But it could be as you know, low touch as just celebrating a team member and celebrating the success of a team. And as a leader, I know how time poor we all are. So don't necessarily take it all on your own shoulders. Identify a couple of people in your team that might be really good at this stuff and might think like this, and give them the challenge of tapping you on the shoulder to say, this should be content we share externally. Let me help you package it up. So sharing the load would be my other tip.
I love all of that. So for all of our community, if they want to know more about the work you do, and I'm sure many of them do, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, my email is there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a very active user of LinkedIn with my domain that I'm in. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a note if I can do any more. We do an awful lot of consulting workshops. So if any of this stuff resonates, I'd love to spend some time finding out more about what might be challenging you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That has just flown by. I feel like we need to do a part 2 in the new year, and we probably will. But for everyone listening, I think, gosh, I'm going to, you know, just some of the highlights. I think, one, there is a thriving and buoyant job market out there, and 40%-ish are never advertised. You need to be visible. You need to be headhuntable, even if you're not looking for a role. I think this is super important. We talk a lot here about the importance of networks before you need them. the little things matter, you know, having your link to everything you've said, Sarah. And I think also, just again, that to paraphrase what you were just talking about, that as a team or an individual, you have to put stuff out there, and it's not about blowing your own trumpet. It's actually about really showcasing your team, what you're doing. There's so much great stuff there. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been awesome.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, look, my absolute pleasure. So everyone, thanks as always for joining us. You know, I love to have you here. I do miss seeing your faces, but of course, we'll be back tomorrow, Thursday at 12 with another fantastic episode of the Digital Transformation Series with myself and Nick. And of course, if you've got any questions, don't forget to register for our circle on Monday via our platform. And if you've got any questions, you know where to find us. Have a fabulous day, and thanks again. See you soon.